Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Jaden and I am a King James Bible believing street preacher based in New York City. And today's study is going to be the next one in the Spirit World series on the fall of Lucifer. Now, please check every reference. Don't just sit here and listen to me talk. You should not have watched this. You should not be watching this video unless you saw the video on the shape of the universe. Because in that video, I went on a very deep explanation on the shape of the universe. And so if you don't know those details coming into this one, you're going to be very confused because I'm not going to sit around and explain what I've already explained in that video. The series is meant for you to watch in the order I set it up, all right? All right, so the fall of Lucifer. Now, there's one part of this doctrine that is very mysterious, and I'm going to give you two permutations, and it's going to be on you to decide what you think. But I'm not really entirely sure which side I want to take because the prophecy that it concerns is very nuanced. But when I get there, I'll let you know. Now, the last thing before I start is uh, the fall of Lucifer, as everybody knows it, is not what the Bible says happened. You see what I mean by that? Well, everybody's idea of the fall is that there was this war in heaven, and then God kicked out a third of the angels, and then now Lucifer is kind of just chilling and being a jerk. No, that's not what happened. The way they're getting that interpretation is because they read a book by a man named John Milton, and in that book, it's called Paradise Lost. He took the war that Michael has with the devil in Revelation 12 and read it back into Isaiah 14. Now, I understand why he made that error, which is why I'm going to explain it later when I talk about the two permutations that show up. But no, that war in heaven has not happened yet. That's not how the devil fell. We're going to go through everything in this video. The devil, who he is, his names, what God did to him, everything. So without further ado, let's just get started. All right. So the devil. So his name, before he fell, what's his name? Yeah. His name is Lucifer. His name means light bearer. Light bearer. Now, I don't care what the Greek and the Hebrew and the Latin, whatever. I don't care. Okay. The other translations and the other modern Bibles, they destroy this and they say, no, his name doesn't mean it's not Lucifer. You're a wicked King James heretic because you believe that his name is Lucifer. That's a wrong translation. No, it's an advanced Revelation translation. So now what's funny about his name is that if you go read modern Bibles, even translated from the King James in other languages, uh, they destroy his name unintentionally or intentionally. I'm not sure. Like for example, in Japanese, instead of using the English name that they have a system for borrowing words from, they put his name in the Chinese, but his name in Chinese means morning star. Well, that's Jesus's title. So the devil has a hand and all that stuff. He doesn't want you to know his name before he fell, which is why there's only one verse in the Bible where it shows up. Now his name, it means light bearer. Now, before I actually go into the fall and all that stuff, I actually have to go into some other details. What was he before he fell? We're going to look at the book of Ezekiel chapter 1. Ezekiel chapter 1. Let's talk about the cherubs of heaven. Ezekiel chapter 1. All right, so there are 5 cherubs in heaven. At least they're supposed to be 5, but one of them is missing. We're going to look at these different cherubs, and we're going to notice what you notice. We're going to look and see what you notice about these cherubs here. Going to say in verse 9, their wings were joined one to another, and they turned not when they went, and they went every one straight forward. Now, by the way, these creatures, I'm going to show you how you know they're cherubs from the text. But if you look at verse 5, they're called the 4 living creatures. Now, in Ezekiel, there are other living creatures, okay? But these ones in particular are going to be the cherubs. Now, the last thing you need to know is that this vision Ezekiel has, he sees it again in chapter 10, which we're going to check later. And then John sees this vision again, but when he sees it, the circumstances are completely different, right? Okay, so what do they look like? Verse 10. And as for the likeness of their faces, they 4 had the face of a man and the face of a lion on the right side. And they 4 had the face of an ox on the left side. And they 4 had the face of an eagle. Okay, so they have wings. They have like this body of a man, sort of, and then they have a calf. If you look at verse 7, they have a calf's foot with straight feet. All right, I don't even understand the bottom, but from what it looks like, they have a face that goes like this way, this way, and this way. So they can look in all four directions at the same time, but every face on it is a different beast, right? So if you look in verse 10, it's going to say one of them had the face of a man, lion, ox, and eagle. So let's look at that, right? So let me draw you four circles. I'll do it this way so it's easy for you to understand. We have four circles. So the first one said man, right? Then it said lion. Let's do another two circles. Then it said ox. And then it's going to say eagle. There's something very significant about all four of the way these are categorized. We'll get into that in a second. I first want to show you that these are definitely cherubs. Go to Ezekiel chapter 10. Ezekiel chapter 10. Ezekiel 10. Okay, we're going to look at verse 12 or verse 11. When they went upon their four sides. They turned not as they went, but to the place whither the head looked, they followed it. And they turned not as when they went. And their whole body and their backs and their hands and their wings and the wheels were full of eyes round about, even the wheels that they four had. We're not getting into the wheels. And as for the wheels, it was cried unto them in mine hearing, O wheel. And every one had four faces. Okay, so remember how in chapter 1 we have four? Let's read it again and see what Ezekiel sees this time. The first face was the face of a cherub. The second was of a man. The third of a lion. The fourth of an eagle. So look how we have the lion, the eagle, the man. But then Ezekiel, he doesn't say ox the second time. He says cherub. All right, now that's extremely significant. That's extremely significant. So it's the face of a cherub. Let me use a different color. Let's use brown. Now, don't you know what's so interesting about this? I'm going to show you in the passage, but the devil was a cherub. Now, isn't it strange that the cherubs are said to have like straight feet with the calf's foot? So you know what every movie does? They have a funny guy with red horns and black horns and red skin, and he walks around with a split hoof. You know what's also really strange? In the Garden of Eden, God told the devil, "Thou art cursed above all cattle." Isn't that interesting? I don't know. This doctrine, by the way, this doctrine gets really deep. So if you're watching and you haven't seen the other videos or you're not ready, please don't watch this. All right. We have man, lion, eagle, and we have an ox. Okay. Now, what's the significance about these four cherubs? Notice the animal kingdoms. Men are not animals, but they are living things. So we have mankind as one of them. One cherub represents mankind. Then we have an ox. What do ox represent? They represent domesticated animals. Domesticated animals. Now, look at the thing here. Lions are going to represent wild animals. Wild animals. And then we have the eagle, which represents flying animals. What's missing? Do you see the problem here? What's missing? I'll tell you what's missing. We'll do a cube. What's missing is aquatic animals. So you have one cherub for each of the animal kingdoms, and then you have aquatic animals, and it's not there. You read in Ezekiel 1 and 10. It said 4 living creatures. Where's the 5th one? Go to Revelation chapter 4. Just want to show you John's vision of the same thing. Now, in Ezekiel's vision, the cherubs are doing different things. They're picking up the throne of God. They're flying around, doing their whatever they do. But then if you look in Revelation chapter 4, verse 6, it says, and before the throne, there was a sea of glass like unto crystal. And in the midst of the throne, and round about the throne, there were 4 beasts full of eyes before and behind. The first beast was like a lion, and like a calf, and like a man, and was like a flying eagle. Well, look at the confirmation there. Well, what you're seeing here is that when John saw the vision, he didn't see an ox, he saw a calf, but it's the same class type of animal. Which means that what you're seeing there in Revelation chapter 4 is what Ezekiel saw in chapter 1 and chapter 10, right? Now, notice in John, he said that the vision he saw, there was a sea of glass. Well, this is why I said you had to watch the Shape of the Universe video. The sea of glass is the floor of the third heaven, which means that they were on top of the glass that holds up where the throne is. And the four cherubs were there. Now you say, well, what are the four cherubs doing there? Well, in the tabernacle is a picture of the one up in heaven. And the way God has it set up is that there are four of these cherubs and they surround the throne of God. Now, the problem is that there's supposed to be a fifth one. So if God's chair is like, well, if God's throne is like this, if God's throne is like this, and he's sitting on his throne, well, he has one cherub here, one cherub here, one here, and then one here. But there's a fifth one missing. Where is he? You see that? Okay. So now let me draw you a little timeline. I'm going to draw a line for you like this, and I'm going to draw a visual for you, like the shape of the universe video, so that you can keep up with what I'm about to explain. Okay? So we're going to put this line here, and then we're going to do the triangle again. The triangle. Okay. Now, let's look at some verses on this. So look at Ezekiel 28. Ezekiel 28. Ezekiel 28. Now, I'm going to start treading on murky waters because there's going to be parts of this doctrine I cannot explain to you because of the nature of just God leaving details out, okay? But let me just preface this by saying the devil did not fall in the Garden of Eden. He didn't fall in the days of creation either. Okay, he fell way before that. All right. So I showed you from the Genesis Gap video that God, after he flooded the planet, when he created Adam, he made the firmament, which is the universe, and then he put the waters above the universe, some of them, and then he left some of them below the universe, and he called that heaven. So you don't have the devil falling. You don't have the devil falling in the days of creation. Okay, he already fell. God took that and then put them up there. We're gonna get into it. Ezekiel 28 and verse 12. Son of man, take up a lamentation upon the king of Tyrus, and say unto him, Thus saith the Lord God, Thou sealest up the sun, full of wisdom and perfect in beauty. Thou hast been in Eden, the garden of God. Okay, there's a problem here. The problem here is that the verse says that he was in Eden, the garden of God. Is this the Garden of Eden? Well, we're going to find out. It's going to say, by the way, it says that he was full of wisdom and perfect in beauty. So this wasn't not just any regular creation. He was full of wisdom, full of wisdom. What else? Perfect in beauty. Now you got these charismatics. They're like, I'm going to bind the devil. I'm going to show him who's boss. You're not going to show him nothing, dude. He is the second most powerful being in creation. The only thing that surpasses him is God. And God can just snap his fingers, get rid of him if he wanted to. But God has this little plan going on to have humanity, right? But you're not binding nothing, man. You're not binding nothing. I'm going to bind the devil and pray him away in the name of Jesus. No, you're not. That is a sign of a fleshy baby. The devil, he is so subtle and he is so intelligent because God created him to be that way. All right. Now, he was full of wisdom and perfect in beauty. Now, how is he beautiful? In verse 13, every precious stone was thy covering: sardius, topaz, diamond, beryl, onyx, jasper, sapphire, emerald, carbuncle, and gold. Do you know what's so interesting about those gems? I don't remember the word in science. I think it's isotropic or anisotropic or whatever. But basically, there are some metals, there are some gems that when you shine light on them, they don't reflect the light, so they just remain like a dull color. An example of that, I'm not actually sure, but then there are some metals that when you shine a light on them, they illuminate infinite colors. Some of the ones here, they do that. They do that. So that means that when he was created, he was beyond beautiful. He had like every color on like the spectrum, right? Notice this interesting detail here. The workmanship of thy tabrets and of thy pipes was prepared in thee in the day when thou was created. Okay. So notice this strange detail here. It said tabrets and pipes. Pipes. So the devil, Lucifer, before he fell, he had tabrets and pipes. Notice how these tabrets and pipes were prepared in him. You said, what's the big deal with that? I showed you in Ezekiel that, remember, he's a cherub. You're going to see it in the passage. He's a cherub. What do cherubs have? They have parts of their body that are like men, but they're not men. They're like these four-faced creature things, right? Now, what is inside of you? You have tabrets and pipes. Say, what? Your voice box, it's a windpipe. In your voice box, you have strings. That's what helps you talk. When you talk, your throat reverberates. So God prepared that in him. So for whatever reason, when he created the cherubs, especially him, there were aspects of them that's in you. Isn't that strange? Now, what am I getting at? That means that he could sing, most likely. And if he could sing, he must have had a beautiful voice. And if you have tabrets and pipes in you, that means that you can sing. Say, what's the big deal with that? Well, what makes you think the devil doesn't have any influence over music? He's called the god of forces. These guys are like, no, it's only the lyrics in music that's bad. It's not the sounds. Don't tell me that, man. I've been playing piano for 13 years. I studied every genre imaginable. The sound of a song definitely has influence on your mental state. 100%. Music is a universal language. That's why the devil uses music to damn people. That's why I tell people, I'm not legalistic. I'm not going to be like, hey, you can't listen to that song. But to be honest to God, there's tons of music you should not be listening to. Because the subliminal messaging and the backdrop, the beat, it's designed to make you feel a certain way. That's not good for you. So I'm not going to say in judgment on some people. You know exactly what I'm talking about. Right? I'm not trying to be legalistic, but you know exactly what I'm talking about if you've been around the block for a while. I used to listen to heavy death metal. I can't listen to that stuff anymore because it's just grinding. The distortion of the guitar, it sounds wrong because it is. Because the devil, he's a distorted being. So he corrupts music. Now, guitar is not evil, but it's what they use it for that makes it evil. Bob Jones Sr. used to say that every bad thing is a good thing twisted. Anyway, so now I want you to also notice, I didn't put it up here. I'll put it here now. He is created. He is created. So the devil is a created being. He is not eternal in the sense like God is. He has not always been there. All right. Let's keep looking at this. It says in verse 14, thou art the anointed cherub that covereth. That means that if Jesus is the Christ, the devil has a Christ. See, he's anointed. Now, notice how it says that covereth. Covereth what? Well, if you keep reading, it says, and I have set thee so. Thou wast upon the holy mountain of God. Thou hast walked up and down in the midst of the stones of fire. Is that the Garden of Eden with Adam? Wherever the devil was, this is where this doctrine starts to get mysterious. I showed you in the Shape of the Universe video that the firmament, which is the universe, was only created after the fall of the devil, of Lucifer. The firmament was created in the 6 days of creation. There was no firmament before that. You say, well, what's the big deal with that? Well, like I told you, you don't have to agree with this, but I'm just going to give you my theory, okay? If there was no firmament, if the stars and the universe were not there before Adam was created, because you see that the creation, it's God created in the beginning, then there's a flood, and then after that you have the recreation, right? Well, if there's no firmament there, if there's no curtain, like I showed you in that video, to block off himself from his creation, that means that heaven, I'll put heaven as a cloud. Heaven, where God is, and earth were in coalescence with each other. That makes the most sense because there's no firmament before the Genesis gap. That's made after the gap. That's made when Adam is created and then the 6 days of creation, right? That means that wherever the devil was, if he's covering the throne of God, but he's also in Eden, the garden of God, there must have been a version of Eden where the devil was before he fell. I told you, this is going to get deep. This is going to get deep, right? Now, the way you know this is that at the end of the Bible, in Revelation 22, the new heavens, the new earth, and New Jerusalem are all together in coalescence. There's no more need for a firmament because there's no more sin, right? At least theoretically. Theoretically. You may disagree. That's fine. But this is a theoretical thing, right? So whatever happened, there must be an Eden that was on earth. Now, by the way, let me show you something real quick. Stay on Ezekiel 28 and go to the book of Job. Go to the book of Job. We know this because someone was there at creation that wasn't God. Job. By the way, like I said earlier, this series is in my Spirit World playlist. These are difficult meat doctrines that I don't have all the answers to. I don't profess to have all the answers. I just know where the verses are. So if you are a newer Christian, we're this far in the video, please stop watching and go watch my easier videos on salvation and all that stuff. This is deep stuff. All right, this is really deep stuff. Okay, Job 38, verse 6. Whereupon are the foundations thereof fastened, or who laid the cornerstone thereof, when the morning stars sang together, and all the sons of God shouted for joy? Well, those are the angels. The angels, they're the morning stars, little morning, plural, and then you have the sons of God. Well, the angels were there. They were cheering on God when he was creating. Well, the devil was there too, because Ezekiel said that he set him so. Right? Now, go back to Ezekiel 28. Go back to Ezekiel 28. Ezekiel 28. So, wherever this place is, Eden, the garden of God, God must have modeled the Garden of Eden, right? Listen carefully. He must have modeled the Garden of Eden when he recreated it after the original Eden where Lucifer was. That must be what's going on here. That means that this, and God always does that. Things in the past or the future, or things in the past are always a type of what's in the future. So there's a Mount Zion on earth, and then there's a Mount Zion in heaven, right? And the other issue is that it says in verse 14 that the Lucifer was on the holy mountain of God. Okay, then the problem is which holy mountain? Because there's two of them. Well, that has to be the one in heaven, because there's no Mount Zion on earth yet. Adam hasn't showed up. There's no land of Canaan yet. So heaven and earth have to be together in coalescence before God split them off and draped the firmament over it. That has to be what's going on here. All right, verse 15. Thou was perfect in thy ways from the day that thou was created till iniquity was found in thee. All right, so what happened? One day God got mad at him because iniquity was found in him, so the devil sinned. Now, it says, by the multitude of thy merchandise, they have filled the midst of thee with violence, and thou hast sinned. Therefore, I will cast thee out as profane out of the mountain of God, and I will destroy thee, O covering cherub, from the midst of the stones of fire. That cannot be Mount Zion on earth. Like I said earlier, there's no Mount Zion on earth yet. There's no land of Canaan. At least it's not said in the text anywhere that there is one. This mountain of God must be the one that God has in heaven. That's a type of the one down here for us now. So that means that this is what's going on, if I'm right. You have heaven like this. Heaven and earth are together in coalescence, right? This is heaven and earth. What seems to happen is that we're going to go through more passages on the fall of Lucifer, that when God kicked him out, what did he do? God then took the earth and he flooded it. He flooded it. When did that take place? This is going to be in Genesis 1:2. Genesis 1:2. That's what seems to be going on here. Now, when he flooded the earth, then God started his recreation. So that's going to be Genesis 1:26. Now, in this creation, in Genesis 1-26, then you get the creation of the firmament. What's the firmament? The firmament is the division that creates the universe. So like I showed you in that Shape of the Universe video, there's the first heaven, the open firmament, which is the atmosphere of planet Earth. And then there's the second heaven, which is the universe, which is where the firmament is. And then above that firmament, there's a body of, there's a cloud then a body of water, and then there's the third heaven. I'm going to draw it here for you in a minute. So that means that the firmament was created over here. If the universe and remember how I told you in that video that God compares space to a curtain that he's going to drape back? Well, that wasn't there over here. There was no firmament over here. So let me just reiterate. What seems to be happening is heaven and earth are in coalescence together. There's a Mount Zion on heaven, right? That's where the devil was situated. He was the anointed cherub that covered the throne of God. And it would make sense because that means that the devil, he was the federal head of earth. He was the federal head of earth. Now, the devil sinned and God cast him out. So then after God cast him out, he flooded the planet to destroy any evidence of that world. And then he recreated it with Genesis 1-26. When he recreated it, he knew he was going to make humanity. So then he covered himself from his creation by creating the firmament. That firmament is space. And since God used that firmament to cover himself from his creation, that's why you can't see him. But there's a North Star, Polaris, that's pointing you to where the throne of God is. That star is always fixed in the north because God is in the north, like I showed you in that video, right? So what that means is that when the devil fell, it wasn't like what the movies say in John Milton that there was a war in heaven. God told him, I'm kicking you out. And he kicked him out just like that. Now, I'm going to show you how you know that, but I want to just keep reading real quick. Verse 16, by the multitude of thy merchandise have they filled the midst of thee with violence, and thou hast sinned. Therefore I will cast thee out profane out of the mountain of God. So notice that when he sinned, he sinned with violence. So it wasn't just like a regular type of envy, a regular type of pride. It was a violent, like disgusting type of rebellion. Now, why did he do it? Verse 17, thine heart was lifted up because of thy beauty. Thou hast corrupted thy wisdom by reason of thy brightness. I will cast thee to the ground and I will lay thee before kings. Okay. So then the rest of the chapter is a prophetic reference to the destruction of the Antichrist. But it says that his heart was lifted up because of his brightness and he corrupted his wisdom. So that means that the two things that led him to sin were pride and envy. He wanted God's position, but he also was prideful in who he was as a created being. So that seems to be his issue. Now, let me just draw this for you. So I'm going to redraw the chart for you from the third heaven. And I'm going to show you that the devil, there's a long timeline of his fall. It's not just the one kicking out. So let's do this. We're going to have the third heaven up here where God is. The third heaven. Right? Now there's the floor of the third heaven. So we're going to use a blue one right here. There's the floor of the third heaven. We'll do a dotted line. What's that called? That's called the sea of glass. The sea of glass. We'll draw God's throne here. All right, that's the sea of glass, right? Now at the top of the sea of glass, it said in Job that the face of the deep is frozen. This is a molten looking glass. So we're gonna do a couple of dots here. And then I'm gonna put some fire here. How that works, I don't know how fire is mingled with frozen glass, don't ask me. All right, now after that, you're gonna have a body of water that's right here. A body of water that's right here. This is called the face. This is the waters of the great deep. The Bible calls it the fountains of the great deep. That's what this is. So let me just label this for you. You have you have the throne of God up here, which is where the third heaven is, and then you have the sea of glass. The sea of glass. All right. Now after the sea of glass, okay, you're gonna have that body of water there. That is called the fountains of the great deep. Fountains of the great deep. Okay. Now, after you have the fountains of the great deep, you have that cloud that's over it. And God said in Job 36, he made a swaddling band for it. He used it to prevent these waters from coming in when they burst out like a new womb. So he put this cloud here. There's no name for it, I don't think. So I'll just leave it there. But in Job 36, it said the cloud was at the bottom of the sea. holding back the light of his tabernacle. What? There's no clouds at the bottom of the sea, man. That's talking about this, dude. All right. Now, after that, then you have the firmament. Then you have the firmament. This is the universe. What is the firmament? Just to remind you, although you should have seen my last video on this. The firmament is this borderline that God created that separates this chunk here from this section here. So after you have the sea of glass, you have the fountains of the great deep. There's a body of water there. Then there's a cloud that's holding back that water. And then from that cloud, then God created the firmament, and that's space. That's the universe with the stars and all that stuff, right? And I showed you in the last video that God described this as a curtain. It's a curtain to block his light away from you. I'm going to say this once again. If you didn't watch that video, Shape of the Universe, you need to click off and go watch it if you're interested in this topic. I'm not going to explain all this again. All right. Now, after you have this, the universe of the firmament, then you come into Earth. Let me use green for Earth because of nature. Then you have Earth. Once you have Earth, then you have the open firmament of heaven, which is the open firmament. See that? The open firmament of heaven. So now the way it goes is you have the first heaven. The first heaven. Then you have, let's do the next one. Then you have the second heaven, which is over here. And then you have up here, the third heaven, after you get past the fountains of the great deep, the cloud of the sea of glass. And then in Revelation 15, you have people standing on the sea of glass because it's frozen at absolute zero. All right, now, why did I go through all this review again? Because I'm going to get into some details about Lucifer. Okay, so the problem with Lucifer, this is the thing that I was mentioning earlier, okay? So it's going to be up to you to make your decision, what you think, okay? But to be honest myself, I'm not sure, and I don't want to commit myself to a teaching, but I figured I would bring up this because it's an issue that's in the text. Go to Isaiah 14. Isaiah 14. So Isaiah 14, it's a passage on the devil's rebellion. But the problem is that when I originally filmed this video and I was explaining this, I realized something. Let's read this passage carefully in Isaiah 14. It says in verse 12, "How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? How art thou cut down to the ground, which didst weaken the nations?" Okay, now what's the problem with the text? Now, what Bible believers usually do is they say that this event happened already, right? So let's go in order. Let's go in order. What you read in Ezekiel 100% happened already. So we're going to do this. So there's different, when the Bible talks about the devil being cast out, it's not one casting out. It's actually 5 of them. We're going to go for the first one. The first one has to do with him being cast out in Ezekiel 28. That 100% happened. The problem, though, is that I brought this up to you earlier. The problem with Ezekiel 28 is that you can't have that text work unless you have heaven and earth together, because there's no stars when the devil falls. There's no firmament. So the problem with the text for me is that it says in verse 13, "For thou hast said in thine heart, I will ascend into heaven." The devil wanted to get up here. It says, "I will exalt my throne above the stars of God." Well, that's a problem. There are no stars of God in Genesis 1:1. God hasn't made them yet. Then it also says, "I will sit on the mounts of the congregation and the sides of the north." Well, that's got to be the third heaven. "I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High." So my issue with this passage is that half of the passage seems to indicate this happened already, and half of the passage seems to indicate that this is future. And this is why John Milton got messed up, because this is confusing. If you honestly read the passage the way it is, there's no stars of heaven. But then the passage says that he's going to ascend into the sides of the north. Well, that's another problem. Sides of the north. Was the universe always the shape of a triangle if there was no firmament? So here's how I solve this. This is my personal solution to the problem. What I think it is that this passage, I think it's both. Honestly, I think it's both. Just hear me out for a second. I think the passage is both past and future. Now, I told you this is a deep doctrine. You don't have to agree, okay? The angels don't come at my door, all right? I think what happened is that the universe was always in this shape. And that when the devil wanted to get into heaven, remember how I said earlier that heaven and earth are together? They're in coalescence. All that would mean is that none of this is here. None of this is here. God always there. I'll draw it like this. Look. What it is that the third heaven, there's a third heaven over here. And that the throne, so we'll put the throne of God is up here. And that earth was here. And that they were together. So it's not, so the sides of the north, it was always created that way. What I'm basically getting at is that the passage seems to indicate that he went above the stars of God. Well, there were no stars of God. The firmament hadn't been made yet. But that's also an assumption I'm making. If the earth and the heavens were together, then the other interpretation is that the stars of God are talking about the angels, because the angels are called stars. I'll put that on the screen. So I'm not sure which interpretation is correct, but we know 100% that Isaiah 14 is also a future reference because the rest of the passage is about the destruction of the Antichrist. And so what some people do is they say, okay, they say this. They say that Ezekiel 28 happened in the past, and Isaiah 14 also happened in the past. And then they say that Isaiah 14 will have a future application in Revelation 12, where the devil kicks out, Michael kicks out the devil from heaven. The way they get that interpretation is they say, well, the problem is that there's too many verses and there's too many parts of Isaiah 14 that seem to indicate this happened already. But then there's parts of it that seem to indicate that it's future because the passage is a prophetic reference to the destruction of the Antichrist. And so if the devil tried to take his angels and start a war in heaven to exalt his throne above the stars of God, to sit on the mount of the congregation in the sides of the north, the most logical conclusion is that Isaiah 14 is not only a past reference to what the devil tried to do, but it's a future reference on what he will literally do in the future. And the reason for this dilemma is because there's no firmament in Genesis 1:1. So what stars of God is he exalting his throne above? That's got to be future. But then God calls him Lucifer. That's a past reference before he fell. All right, so we'll stop it there. I'm not sure which interpretation is correct. I'm not sure if Isaiah 14 is future or past, but I just know that his name is Lucifer and he's going to fall. All right, we'll just keep it at that. If that was confusing, by the way, you didn't understand the problem at all, don't worry about it. All right, now the devil gets kicked out. All right, the devil gets kicked out. Okay, let's get to the next set of details. So after he gets kicked out in Ezekiel 28, which 100% happened, what's the next phase? All right, go to Job 26. When God kicked the devil out and he flooded the planet, he partitioned the heavens and he put the devil right here. Let me show you something. Go to Job. Job. The devil has multiple casting outs. He has multiple, 5 of them. Job 26. Job 26. And verse 13. By his spirit he hath garnished the heavens. His hands have formed the crooked serpent. Let's go into the devil now, his names. Let's go into his names now. One of his names when he fell is that, first of all, after the level fell and he became corrupted, God recreated him. He basically broke him and made him into the crooked serpent. So one of his names is the crooked serpent. One of his other names is the dragon. That's in Revelation chapter 12. Okay. One of his other names is Satan. Satan. All right. Now, You see these terms here, crooked serpent and dragon? Go to Isaiah 27. Isaiah 27. So after he kicked him out, God basically reformed him into what he is now. And you say, why would God do that? I'll get into that. By the way, this study's going to get long. Let's look at Isaiah 27. Isaiah 27. The translators, they call him a crocodile. They're confused. Is God going to punish a crocodile? Isaiah 27:1. In that day, the Lord with his sword, great and strong sword, shall punish Leviathan, the piercing serpent, even Leviathan, that crooked serpent. He shall slay the dragon. Where is he? That is in the sea. Is there a great red dragon right now in the sea? No, because when he kicked him out, he lost authority and he put him in this above the second heaven. So right now, the devil's first casting out is from the third heaven to the sea above the second heaven. So now he's right over here. This is the sea. He says, slay the dragon that's in the sea. Why? He's an aquatic monster. Leviathan's aquatic. What is Leviathan? A giant serpent. What is a dragon? A giant serpent. Dragons are aquatic. So that's why the fifth cherub is missing, because the fifth cherub is aquatic animals, and he was the anointed cherub that covereth. So you know what animals Noah didn't take on the boat? Serpents. That's why. See what I mean? Advanced revelation. Only in the King James Bible, man. The first time he cast him out is going to be Ezekiel 28. He lost authority from the third heaven, and now he's above the second heaven. Right? Now, if you keep looking at this, go to Luke chapter 10. He's going to lose authority again. He's going to lose authority again here. Luke chapter 10. Luke chapter 10. Verse 17. And the 70 returned with joy, saying, Lord, even the devils are subject unto us through thy name. And he said unto them, I beheld Satan as lightning fall from heaven. Okay, that's not this heaven out here. He already got kicked out in that one. So after him being in this heaven, he loses authority. He falls from heaven. Where else does he go? Next, he loses authority in the second heaven. So I suppose I should probably redraw this so that I can give you more clarity. So let me just draw this for you again. So this is the third heaven. This is the third heaven at the top, right? Now the devil's going to lose authority. All right. The first time he loses it is Ezekiel 28. Where does he lose it? He loses it from the first heaven, from the third heaven, and now he's going to be cast out. So he's cast out here. That's the first casting out. The second time he loses authority is in Luke 10. Lo, I beheld Satan fall like lightning. So now he doesn't have authority over the second heaven anymore. Should be able to see it. Let me fix it for you again. He doesn't have authority over the second heaven anymore of the universe. Right? See how interesting that is? All right. Now, right now we know that currently the devil is what? He is the prince of the powers of the air. Right now, he's in the first heaven, which is earth. Now, he's not literally on earth. He's still up here in the sea, but he's lost authority. He used to have authority in the third heaven with God, not anymore. He used to have authority over the heavens, not anymore. Now he has authority over the earth because the kingdoms of this world have been given unto him, right? He's the prince of the power of the air, all that stuff, right? So after he lost authority in the earth, what's going to happen? When does he do that? Revelation chapter 12. Revelation chapter 12. Revelation chapter 12. He is the prince of the power of the air, but when the tribulation starts, not anymore, man. Revelation chapter 12. Okay, it's going to say Revelation chapter 12 and verse 8 or 7. And there was a war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon fought his angels, and he prevailed not. Neither was in their place any more in heaven. And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil, which deceiveth the whole world. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. So now In the beginning, he's cast out of the third heaven, and he's relegated to the second heaven below the sea of glass. He's still up there, but now Jesus says, they say that he has authority over the devils. Jesus says, lo, I beheld he fell like lightning. Now he has no more authority over the second heaven. You see the slow descent? Now he's the prince of the power of the air. He controls the kingdoms of the earth. But in the tribulation, he will be cast out of heaven. He will be cast out of heaven. So this is going to be Revelation 12. You could just read the whole chapter, okay? So what's going to happen to him? He's cast out onto the earth, right? Go to Revelation chapter 20. Revelation chapter 20. Then he's cast out again. Cast out again. It says in verse 1, and I saw an angel come down from heaven having the key of the bottomless pit and a great chain in his hand. And he laid hold on the dragon, that old serpent, which is the devil and Satan, and bound him 1,000 years and cast him into the bottomless pit. You see how these passages keep saying cast him out, cast him? So now, in the beginning, he goes from the third heaven to the second heaven. Now he's going from the second heaven to being the prince of the power of the air of the earth, like in Ephesians 2:2. Then in the tribulation, he's cast out into planet Earth, and he becomes the beast, the Antichrist, right? Now, after that fails, he then gets cast into the bottomless pit. He's then cast into the bottomless pit. That's Revelation 20. 1-2, right? So he's cast into here. This is the bottomless pit. I'll put the pit. Then he has one more ending. Go to Revelation chapter 20 again. Revelation chapter 20, and it says in verse 10, and the devil that deceived them was cast into the lake of fire. So that at the end, when everything is said and done, he's then cast into the lake of fire. What is that going to be? That's going to be Revelation chapter 20 and verse 10. Revelation chapter 20, 10. So what you have is the devil is not just cast out one time in the Bible. He starts up here in the third heaven with God, and then he goes on a slow descent. He's first cast out as that covering cherub. God basically kicks him out and recreates him and reforms him into the crooked serpent. And then after that, Jesus shows up. He loses authority in the second heaven in Luke chapter 10. After that, he's cast out onto earth in Revelation chapter 12 to become the beast. That fails. He's then taken by that angel in Revelation 20 verse 1, and he's thrown into the bottomless pit for 1,000 years. And after he's let out of 1,000 years, he's then cast once and for all into the lake of fire. There's 5 casting outs. He has a slow descent where he goes from point A and he goes lower and lower and lower and lower until he's just in hell for good forever. See that? Now, notice that he's an aquatic monster. So where does he go forever? The lake of fire. Revelation chapter 13. Notice this. Notice this. Notice this. Verse 1, and I stood upon the sand of the sea and saw a beast rise up out of the sea. He's an aquatic monster. So these guys are looking for the aliens to come from outer space. They're looking on Mars for the magic balls. Dude, they're right down here, man. When the devil comes, he's going to come out of the ocean. Because he's an aquatic monster. Okay, so this is a very, if you're this far in the video, this is a really hard doctrine. Let's just review a little bit before I continue. The devil's name is Lucifer. He is a created being who is extremely beautiful. He was perfect in wisdom and mighty in power. He was very, very cool. His name is Lightbearer. God must have given him a good singing voice because he had tabrets and pipes in him the same that we do, right? Now, God alongside him had these other 4 cherubs that represent different animal kingdoms. And he was the 5th cherub that represents aquatic animals. And well, what happened? Well, he rebelled against God and he told God, I'm gonna try to take you over. And God was like, aha, and then he kicked him out, right? Now, after he kicked him out, God had to change up the plans. So what God did was he took heaven and earth and split them. He flooded the planet and then he recreated it with the firmament as a curtain to block himself off from humanity so he wouldn't kill us. And now, after that first casting out, The devil's been in a slow descent towards hell, where he starts in the second heaven. He starts from the third heaven, gets kicked out. Now he has authority over the second heaven. He's in the second heaven, but then he loses authority on from that, and he gets cast onto earth, right? After he gets cast onto earth in the tribulation, he's just cast into the bottomless pit. And after he's let out of the pit, he fails his invasion and he gets cast forever into the lake of fire. Now you say, well, why would God create a being knowing that after he sinned, he recreated him knowing what the devil would do to Adam and Eve? I think I have the answer to that. The problem with God is that God can never do evil to do right. Now, God wants to have a creation. God wants to have a creation. So this is God. And this is Adam. What is special about God? He has his own will. God's will. A will is something that is a part of a person, because God is a personal being. Now, if he creates Adam in his image, right? If he creates Adam in his image, how does he know for Adam to really love him and choose him if he doesn't have a choice? God would need something like the devil, something who could test Adam in order for him to find that out. If God can't do evil, God can't tempt somebody with evil. He himself can't be the agent that does it, because then he would be a sinner. But now the devil falls from grace. He sins. So now God takes the devil, he forms him into the scary, crooked serpent, the red dragon, and he lets the devil tempt Adam and Eve. Because the only way for God to bring in a creation that's like him, that has a personal will, he needs that being to be tested. God has never sinned, but if the being is in his image, like Adam was, how does God know that that being is righteous? He doesn't. He needs to let that being make the choice, because God has his own will and he makes choices. Only someone evil like the devil could tempt someone with evil. God can't tempt with evil, but the devil could. He's a useful tool. So let's look at some characteristics about the devil and his personality. Let's look at Job. Now, I neglected to mention this earlier. But the devil, he's losing authority as he's being cast out. But geographically, he's still up here in the second heaven. You understand? You say, why? Because at the end of the day, when he's cast out into earth, he's waging a war in heaven with Michael, which means that he's close to the third heaven. Also, in the book of Job, what is the devil doing right now? What's he doing right now? Job chapter 1. Job chapter 1 is going to say in verse 6, now there came a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan came also among them. Well, let me ask you a question. Where is God? God's in the third heaven. So clearly the devil has access to the third heaven. He just can't have authority over it. So God can tell him what to do. Verse 7, and the Lord said unto Satan, whence comest thou? Then Satan answered the Lord and said, from going to and fro in the earth and walking up and down in it. See that? So he has access to the third heaven. He has no authority in the third heaven. So the term cast out is not just about him being kicked out. It's more than that. It's him losing authority. Because God set him as the anointed cherub. And so in his existence, he's slowly losing authority over every part of the universe. And the reason why he's so interested in damning humanity is because he should have had reign over the planet. And he sinned. All right. Look at the book of Job 41. Job 41. Let's look at some things about the devil. Job 41 verse 1. Canst thou draw out Leviathan with an hook? See that name again? Or his tongue with a cord which thou lettest down? Can thou put an hook into his nose or bore his jaw through with a thorn? You see that? All right, now watch this. Verse 7. Canst thou fill his skin with barbed irons or his head with fish spears? Lay thine hand upon him, remember the battle, do no more. God is basically telling Job, Okay, you can try your hand with the devil once, but once you try him once, you're never going to want to try to fight him again. Verse 9, behold, the hope of him is in vain. Shall not one be cast down even at the sight of him? None is so fierce that dare stir him up. Who then is able to stand before me? God is basically saying, if you can't stand before the devil, you're going to stand before me. That's a scary verse, man. Verse 14, who can open the doors of his face? His teeth are terrible round about. His scales are his pride, shut up together as with a closed seal. Verse 19, out of his mouth go burning lamps and sparks of fire leap out. That's where the Europeans get the idea of a great red dragon breathing fire out of his mouth, because that's where they're getting this from. He says, he breatheth out, verse 21, kindled coals, and flame goeth out of his mouth. Now you can keep reading, but if you go to verse 31, it says, he maketh the deep to boil like a pot. That's the deep. If he's a dragon, serpent, leviathan, water monster that breathes out fire, that means that he makes the deep to boil like a pot. The fountains of the great deep, that's where he is. Do you believe what you're reading? 34. He beholdeth all high things. He is a king over all the children of pride. See that? So, if you want to read more about the devil, you should also read chapter 40 of Job on your own. So this is going to be on the fall of Lucifer. So you have heaven and earth being together. God recreates the planet in Genesis 1:1, floods the planet, God floods the planet in Genesis 1:2. He creates the firmament, and then he puts the devil up there with the other angels that he kicked out. Which, by the way, that's why in Genesis 1:26, when God creates the firmament, he says, and it was so. Because these ding-dongs are up there. That's why it wasn't very good. Because the principalities are up there. Now, after the flood in 126, God recreates this. Then he creates Adam. He creates Adam and Eve in the garden. He creates Adam. After he creates Adam, they get kicked out of the Garden of Eden. And then you have that whole span of history where the devil is just getting knocked until he ends right there, burning in hell forever, like he belongs to be. So I'll close it out on there. This is a very difficult study. I did it this way because everyone already knows the basics about the devil. They know he's a dragon. They know he's the crooked serpent. They know this and that. But I actually wanted to show you more intricate details. This is a very heavy doctrine. So, and like I said, you don't have to agree with all of it, but some of it, even I'm not 100% sure. Just to reiterate, this issue with Isaiah 14, the firmament was created over here in Genesis 1:26, or not 1:26, but in Genesis 1, in the 6 days of creation, right? There's no firmament when God creates the heaven and the earth. There's no need for it because the firmament is a curtain that covers him from his creation. If the devil is there with the sons of God, he doesn't need to cover himself from his creation because they're there with him anyway, right? So the issue with Isaiah 14 is that the devil says he's going to exalt himself above the stars of God. There are no stars of God. So Isaiah 14, some people say it has a future application to Revelation chapter 12. Now, what I'm saying, me personally, this is my personal opinion, I think that Isaiah 14 has applications to both. I think it's not just what the devil did up here in Ezekiel 28. I also think it has to do with the war in heaven in Revelation 12, where the devil is going to try once and for all to take over God with his army of fallen angels, but then it's going to fail. And that's just my personal opinion. And the reason why I think it's both is because he said he was going to ascend into the sides of the north, and there's no reason why the universe wasn't a triangle to begin with when God created the heaven and the earth, right? And the other thing is that the name Lucifer shows up in Isaiah 14, which is telling you that that's a reference to what happened already, because he's not called future. He's not called Lucifer in any other future passage about him being cast into hell forever and all that kind of stuff. So Anyway, those are just little misnomers. The main important part is this about his casting out. So, all right. So I pray you got a blessing from the video. If you didn't understand anything, don't worry. I studied this for a while and I still have a hard time wrapping my head around it. This is going to go in the Spirit World playlist. Make the board available. Grace be to you all.